Imprisonment of the Mind. Written by Johnny Fist. Philippe de Bruno sat in his cell. The tower was tall, and his place of confinement was right beneath the roof. The window through which the sunlight fell was far too high for him to reach, to gaze at the horizon, to look out and enjoy the beauty of the view unfolding before him. It had been done deliberately, to torment the prisoner. The surrounding walls pressed in on him, and the impossibility of even a brief glimpse of the freedom that seemed so near yet so far away was disheartening to everyone except Philippe. He had been here for 135 days. In that time, he had never left the walls of his confinement. At first he had wanted to, but over time he had grown accustomed. He grew accustomed to the rustlings that came through the walls. He grew accustomed to hearing the voices of the walls. He found his old comrades there. Philippe de Bruno's story was as tragic as it was romantic. He had once been a ship captain who disobeyed His Majesty's orders for the sake of a woman he loved endlessly. He abandoned and betrayed his homeland to sail to her on full sail aboard his ship, the Santo Domingo, a Spanish frigate he had captured, which became his faithful companion for his adventures, though only for a brief 3 years. Philippe fell in love with a Corsican woman he met on an archipelago under English rule. At the time, he was escorting French ships to protect them from pirates and Spaniards. The short-lived peace between France and England reduced the threat of British vessels, but did not eliminate it entirely. He still remembered the day he came ashore to replenish supplies and feel the ground beneath his feet. In a small town, he saw her, Gertrude. She lay in a hammock, reading a book. Her fresh face and light white dress gave her an angelic appearance. He immediately fell madly in love. She reciprocated. During the 4 days he stayed on the island, they tried to spend every minute together. But the time came for him to continue his journey. No matter how much he wished to stay, he could not. Duty was paramount. Philippe asked Gertrude to come with him and become his wife. She refused. She could not do so without her father's consent. Philippe swore that when his expedition ended, he would return for her. He would certainly return, and then they could unite their hearts in marriage and be together forever. He asked only one thing of her, to wait for him and give her heart to no one else. He would return. To seal their feelings, they exchanged small vials filled with each other's blood. Now he wore a vial of her blood around his neck, and she had one of his. They made a blood oath to love each other forever, no matter what befell them. Then his ship set sail. Every day at sea, he was melancholy yet hopeful, believing he would soon return to Gertrude. He scanned the horizon, imagining she was there, far away, missing and waiting for him as he missed her. When Philippe de Bruno returned to France with his fleet, news spread that a Spanish fleet had attacked the English, and talk of open conflict arose. France, bound by a fragile truce with both England and Spain, took a neutral stance, ordering all its captains not to engage in any confrontations and to avoid any battles they might encounter. To Philippe's great misfortune, he heard that Spaniards had attacked the archipelago where Gertrude lived. His heart could not bear it. He requested permission to go immediately and rescue her, but he was denied. Anyone who disobeyed a royal order was to be deemed a deserter and sentenced to death. For 3 days, Philippe drowned his despair in one wineskin after another. He wrote petitions over and over, but the high command refused. On the 3rd day, he could bear it no longer. He gathered his crew, his most loyal sailors, outfitted the Santo Domingo, bribed the port guards, and under cover of night sailed for the archipelago to Gertrude. The ocean seemed aware that a traitor was on its waves. Philippe could hardly recall a voyage so violently tossed by the waters. His journey was arduous and dangerous. He lost several sailors. His ship was battered, but he reached his destination. Approaching the island, he was met by Spanish ships, which were far from friendly or neutral to vessels flying the French flag. In the brutal battle, the Santo Domingo was sunk. Philippe and a few sailors managed to reach the island, only to be captured immediately. He was thrown into confinement. He paced restlessly, desperate to know what had become of Gertrude. No one answered. He managed to trade his gold buckles for information about her. A small boy running about the island eagerly accepted such a gift from the prisoner in exchange for trivial intelligence. Those hours of waiting stretched into eternity for Philippe. When the boy returned, he brought news Philippe dreaded. Gertrude had been forcibly taken from the island by the Spaniards. Rumor had it she had even been married off to some noble conquistador. Philippe was shattered. His life lost all meaning. He wished to end it, but lacked the strength. France, a country that loved to execute its traitors even more than its enemies, considered Philippe de Bruneau just that, despite the nobility of his actions. When tensions between nations eventually eased, the Spaniards exchanged Philippe and many other French prisoners for several sacks of French gold. Thus Philippe found himself in the very cell mentioned at the start of this tale. He had longed for death long before. He had even begged his executioners to hasten it, but new wars and conflicts prevented a proper trial, and he was forgotten for a time. Days turned into weeks, then months. All he possessed was the small vial of Gertrude's blood around his neck. Over time, he began to see her visage in the walls and, from loneliness, spoke to her, and she answered. One protrusion in the wall reminded him of her father, though he had never seen him. He pleaded with the father for her hand. Sometimes he consented, sometimes he displayed his English stubbornness. Philippe found new arguments to persuade him. On other days, he saw the faces of his king and queen in the walls. He implored them to allow the noble French captain to wed the fair British girl. They did not immediately agree either. In such imagined conversations, weeks passed. The company his imagination provided curbed his desire to end it all. He wanted to live, believing that Gertrude, somewhere far away, was unhappy in marriage. When he was freed, he would find her and they would be together, as they had sworn in their blood oath. The day came when, early in the morning, a priest came to Philippe. Philippe did not know why. After so many days he had seen no living face. His jailer merely slid him food through a slot. Yet now the priest arrived. When the priest explained that clergy visited prisoners only for last rites and to absolve sins, Philippe still did not believe it. This could not be the day of his death. He listened willingly, but did not confess. He had long since confessed in dreams to another priest. Then he was left alone. An hour later, fresh clothes were brought. Again, Philippe thought he was about to appear before a court for pardon and freedom. Clad in new garments, he would set out to find Gertrude. A couple of hours later, he was brought to the square. As he walked, Philippe noticed many beautiful people. Though he was the only one with hands tied behind his back and under guard, in his mind, he imagined the moment he would stand before Gertrude's father to ask for her hand. They led him to the gallows. He climbed. The square was crowded with those eager to witness the execution of a traitor to France. Philippe wore a faint smile, scanning each face as his sentence was read. Suddenly his gaze fell on a couple in the distance. He recognized her. It was Gertrude. Her face was as beautiful as the day he first met her, yet something had changed in her features. He smiled at her. She looked calmly back. There was neither joy nor pity on her face. Philippe's gaze moved to the man beside her. Only then did he understand. She held his arm, and on her hand was a ring. Philippe's smile vanished. He looked down at the vial of her blood around his neck. He quickly glanced at Gertrude's neck, but she no longer wore the vial of his blood. He met her eyes. From her look, he understood everything. She was indifferent to his fate. He was no longer her man. She had found another. The boy, it seemed, had been right. Not only had she been forced into marriage, but it appeared she had also fallen in love with her husband. That meant he was no longer needed. The days and weeks he had spent imagining their future were in vain. It was over. Gertrude whispered something to her companion, and they left the square. She cast one last glance at Philippe and disappeared behind a building. A tear fell from his eye. Then another. and another. He had restrained himself all this time because he still believed. Now there was no reason. He wept bitterly and inconsolably, and the entire square seemed to sympathize instantly. The executioner placed the noose around his neck. The priest asked if he had a final wish. Philippe begged him to remove the vial, which he had cherished so dearly. This was his last wish. The priest complied. The executioner counted to 5 and pulled the lever. Philippe suffered no more. In an instant, his spine snapped and his body hung lifeless from the rope. Thus ended the life of the ill-fated French captain of the Santo Domingo, who once fell in love with the beautiful Corsican Gertrude on an archipelago. But he died not as a romantic who loved and was abandoned, yet believed to the last moment in the future of his love, but as a traitor to France.